Greetings and welcome back to yet another episode of the Daily Run, and today we're playing as Maggie. So it's another special daily, and for some reason someone thought it would be a good idea to have two dailies where you're playing as Maggie and your speed is basically zero. At this point we have 0.4 speed, which is definitely on the low side. I'm not really looking forward to this run. Sure, we got two of the bucket items, which I'm not really sure what the point of that is. Maybe it's like an international bucket day, but both of these items slow you down, and you can see that being at 0.4 speed is not a good time. Just if you walk into an enemy, or if there are enemies which are faster than you, you're gonna take so much damage, and if you don't find any ways to get the speed upgrade, you're basically boned when you get to the later stages of the floor. And this is exactly the reason why I'm investing so much time here to try to play the Blood Bank, because if there's even a remote chance of getting a Blood Bank, that will infinitely help me in my quest of getting a little bit more speed. But luckily, besides maybe that one little hiccup at the start, sure, you know, we maybe didn't have enough speed, but luckily the enemies and the bosses we faced weren't all that difficult, or I would say they were doable even with this speed. Of course, it was a bit annoying to just navigate through the rooms and try to maybe get something done, but overall, I still feel like it was a decent run. It's definitely something that I think you have to give a chance first, and once you get, I would say, like to the 4th to the 5th floor, and if you maybe make a few right decisions, and just, of course, take your time, then you're kind of bound to have a good time. It's definitely a good run in all things considered, and it definitely, I would say, prones itself to maybe look weaker than it actually is. Of course, if you kind of look at the stats, or I would say items now, just imagine if we didn't have the lard and we didn't have thunder tides. At this point, we would have not only growth hormones, we would have 8-inch nails, but also we would have sad onion. Now, of course, the less than 3 or the heart item is not bad at all, because it gives you basically health container, but also the battery baby is decent, especially when you combine it with something like Mom's Box, because that does allow you to use it more frequently, which means you're much more likely to get a trinket that actually matters or that will make a difference. Of course, ideally what we would be looking for here is something that would allow us to break the game. It's definitely one of those runs which is very breakable, not only because there were so many shops that essentially had a restock machine in them, which means that it's very likely that you actually find something, or I would say if you bomb it enough times, it's very likely that you're gonna get and buy something that's actually gonna influence the run in some way. For example, at a certain point, you get a blank card, and of course with a blank card you can do all kinds of shenanigans, but also if you use Mom's Box, I would say religiously, and because you have the car battery, you get 2 trinkets per use, then of course it's basically just a matter of time before you get something like cracked dice. And once you have cracked dice, of course, then you can hope to get something like an Ivy bag or maybe a way to damage yourself, and that's basically again a combo just to get an infinite amount of points and really kind of spiral out of control from that position. So just in all aspects, this run really did have everything if you wanted to look for it. It had the damage upgrades, it had the tear upgrades, but it also, I would say, had a lot of potentiality just to get a lot of points overall. The strategy I decided to stick with, I think, is one of the safer ones, and definitely not something I would it's definitely something what I would recommend, but not if you want to look cool, if that makes sense. So what I decided to do, of course, is I picked up the Book of Shadows. I got a bookworm transformation because there were 3 books in there, no reason not to do that, but also the Book of Shadows, I decided to stick with it, not only because I have a way to basically get more charges, but also because the car battery actually works supremely well with this particular item, and that is that every time you use it, instead of just getting a shield, for example, for 5 seconds, now you're getting a shield for 10 seconds. And when you combine this with something like the Cube of Meat, and later on we got Serpent's Kiss, and I think we also got a battery, that is basically just a recipe for success. You're pretty much invincible, and you can go through the rooms without really worrying about getting hit. If you go in a room and you feel like you can do it without taking damage, that's great, because it just kind of stockpiles up. And then of course, because you have 2 uses because of the battery that we get later on, then you're really kind of able just to stay invincible forever. It's especially useful against bosses, it's useful against boss rush, and because we have battery baby, it was actually pretty useful against Harsh as well, because I think I used it 4 times in total in that particular boss fight, and basically just because I was so invincible for so long, I just wasn't able to get hit. So I decided to stick with this strategy. It felt like it was going to be the right one, and I think in the end it did turn out to be one of the safer options that provided to be a very enjoyable and fun run. Now of course there were still some instances where I did get hit, sometimes a little bit intentionally, just because I tried to go a bit faster. Like in the previous room I had a black card, and the room was just nasty. At first I tried to dodge it, of course, then I got hit, but then I realized this is actually a blessing in disguise, because the black card just took everything out at the same time, and then I was actually able to get the boss rush. So getting hit in that position was probably the best thing that could have happened, because if you think about it, I basically traded like, let's say, 500 points away for getting hit, but I got like 4,000 points in return because I managed to get to boss rush. So just in that regard, the run was very fortunate, and of course we were still strong enough because of our Book of Shadows, and because we have no Meat Boy, because we used the potato peeler, and also because of the Cube of Meat and the invincibility. we're really not only doing work and doing a lot of damage to enemies in the room, but also because now of chocolate milk and just overall all the damage upgrades we've gotten throughout the run, now we're really able to get in there and really kind of, I would say, be personal with bosses as well, and that does allow us, I would say, to just stay ahead of the curve a little bit. Of course, the Book of Shadows also has some other uses, like for example playing the Blood Mangs, and of course that allows you to get a little bit more money, or if there is a Devil Beggar, we can play that as well, especially at this point, or I think at a certain point we have 2 guppy items, so having an opportunity to get items from the Devil Deal pool is definitely gonna come in handy, because just getting that guppy transformation is gonna give us flight, and when you have flight and when you combine something like this alongside it, I feel like that's really gonna be that's gonna take your run from an S to like an S++, and this is kind of what I was looking for, but really I have no complaints other than the fact that maybe in some instances the run still felt a little bit sluggish, and for some reason speed was capped at 1.4. I'm not too big of a fan of that, but at least we did get to that particular soft cap that is set. I'm not really sure why they included it in the first place. Sure, you know, maybe being at 0.4 is gonna be the default base stat, which we all start at, but if you find items that are gonna increase your speed throughout the run, why not let us go above 1.4? Why not let us go to 2 like we're used to? I'm not really sure what the reasoning for that is, other than we don't want you to have fun, and I hope that maybe with this special daily out of the way, I really hope that we won't have any more, which will affect, I would say, some of our base stats. Like if there's a run which reduces your range to essentially 0 and you're forced to just be very up close and personal with enemies, then I think I'm gonna really kind of regret saying this right now, because I kind of jinxed it. But also just, I would say, runs that affect your stats in a way that makes them a little bit more boring are just overall not very enjoyable. Well, at least, you know, if you look back on it at this one, at least we had the opportunities, we had all of the chances to really get a strong run going, and I feel like to a certain extent we took one of those opportunities and managed to make it work. And in the end, that's really all that matters. You need to find something or a strategy that works for you, and when you get to the end, of course, you can look back on it, reminisce, and think if it was actually the best one. Now, of course, I could have gotten more points if I decided to keep the blank card. There were a lot of cards, maybe I would have found like a Yarrow rune that would have allowed me just to get more points, but in terms of, I would say, just how comfortable you are, I feel like you really can beat the Book of Shadows alongside with some battery items. So I kind of repeated myself there a few times, but we are at the end, and this is exactly why I'm making some of these videos a little bit shorter, just because, you know, there's so many episodes at this point, and I feel like kind of mentioning certain things that I've mentioned a million times before is not really a good idea, so I just decided to stick and focus on the run and just give you a rundown of what happened, and maybe, you know, some of the crucial points that happened just as we went along. Like the first thing here you have to notice, I only took, I think, 2 hearts of damage through the whole run, and my damage penalty was actually quite high with 1400 points. Maybe I got hit a few more times than that, but I really feel like I only got hit twice throughout the run. Remember, all of the other times I was basically invincible, so there really was no room for me to get hit there. But even if I only got hit twice, this is still a very large damage penalty in all regards, because that's essentially 700 points a hit. So if you learned something from this video, that is, don't take damage. It's gonna be much better for you if you want to rank well. And with that said, I hope you enjoyed this one, guys, and I hope to see you next time.